pleasure to introduce Joe Mackesett, who will speak this evening on the Morris Canal, its history and preservation. A New Jersey history buff, as you heard, Joe's a graphic designer of historic exhibits. He organizes and presents industrial heritage walks for the Morris County Parks Commission. In addition to being active in several historical societies, Joe is president of the Roebling chapter of the Society of Industrial Archaeology, which I hope you tell us more about.
Okay.
Please welcome Joe.
Thank you. We're going to talk about the history of the Morris Canal. We're going to talk about some technology for you engineer folks out there. We're not going to get too technical, so if we get a little crazy with questions, we'll kind of save them till the end. But since it's a small crowd, let's keep it light, and if there's a question, raise a hand and call it out. We're going to talk about a lot about where the canal is today. This is a very neat time for canal fans. The canal now has a greenway project, and it is now becoming a statewide project. There are canal restorations going on in Warren, Morris, Passaic, and Hudson County. Essex is the only one left out so far, and is really becoming quite a big deal. So I'm going to be showing you pictures not only of the history of the canal, but in many cases where you can still find it today. Another picture. Morris Canal. It was chartered in 1824 and lasted almost 100 years. The construction was completed in 1831, and it was built to carry coal from mines in Pennsylvania across New Jersey to markets that they hope to develop in the harbor at New York. It was more or less a direct route between those coal fields and what they hoped would be the biggest coal market, right straight across New Jersey. But unfortunately, the highlands of New Jersey were in the way, and so the Morris Canal had to climb uphill all the way to Lake Apacong and then go downhill all the way to the coast, and that posed quite a bit of a problem. That was almost 1,700 feet of elevation change, up one side, down the other. That 1,700 feet of elevation change was quite an accomplishment in that day. It was a world record then, and it still is a world record. No one has been silly enough to try to build a canal over a mountain. And in order to accomplish that, they had to use different kinds of technology. Another picture. There are those mines in Pennsylvania, millions of tons of anthracite coal. And people back in the late 1820s, early 1830s realized that if they could only find a way to sell that coal to somebody, they could make a lot of money. But actually delivering it from the place where it was to where they could sell it was going to be a big deal. So they built, many people built a lot of coal carrying canals to get at those coal fields. The D&H Canal goes up here, the Lehigh Canal comes through here, the Schuylkill Canal comes through here. There's even a canal that comes down and comes down to the area of Baltimore. All these cities are trying to get a piece of that pie, and of course the New York market, they want to have their piece, and of course the Morris Canal is the most direct connection between coal fields and the markets. Another picture. One thing that the canal needs is water, and the central concept here is that Lake Apacong, right at the top, the highest point of the highlands, is a great big source of water. George McCullough, the fellow whose concept it was to build the canal, realized that if he could get the water rights to what was called Great Pond back in those days and dam it up, he could make a really, really big canal reservoir. And that's basically what happened. So Lake Apacong, as we know it today, is not really a natural lake. It's a canal reservoir. It's owned by the state of New Jersey because, of course, the state of New Jersey acquired the water rights from the canal. So they had probably in the beginning about 140 miles worth of square miles of watershed, but unfortunately that wasn't enough. They were going to take water from Lake Apacong, but Lake Apacong drains this way. It drains down the Musconetcong River to Phillipsburg, and they were going to start taking some water from the Rockaway River. Their watershed is the green part, but that wasn't going to be enough to fill up their canal. So very early on, the picture, the board of the Morris Canal and Banking Company negotiated with the Ryersons, and they got the right to another lake called Long Pond. Back in those days, they dammed up that lake and made it much larger, and it is what we know of as Greenwood Lake today. And they were able to run that water down I guess it comes down the Waterloo River, and they built a water control system, here in Pompton Plains, actually, just below Pompton Lakes, and a 5-mile long feeder that brought water down to the canal at Mountain View. That gave them access to the Ramapo and the Wanacue and the Pequannock River, and increased the watershed that the canal had access to 445 square miles. And a huge amount of water. And that's what helped keep the canal filled with water, is Eastern Division from Lake Apacong all the way to Jersey City. That was very hard to keep that full. And of course, no water, no boats, no money. Doesn't work. Another picture, please. We talk a lot about locks, and of course those wonderful inclined planes that everybody just loves. But there's another piece of the canal that's actually pretty neat, and it's the part that goes through Passaic County, from all the way from Lincoln Park to Bloomfield. There's a 17-mile long level. They don't need a lock or an inclined plane. The engineers were able to find a course across 2 major rivers and around several large mountains, and be able to take the canal all that way without it having to go up or down a single bit. And this is the part of the canal that's going to become the Canal Greenway in Passaic County, and a whole bunch of it is already there. It's already walkable. It's really a pretty neat thing. More about that later. Another picture. The canal had to first cross the Pompton River, and they built a wooden aqueduct that took the water across that river, and then at Little Falls they built a very huge stone aqueduct that took the canal over that river. Another picture. But then, having to climb over the highlands was really the big problem that they needed to accomplish. And they used both old technology and new technology. Old technology would be canal locks. They've been around for thousands of years. Supposedly the Chinese developed them maybe 10,000 years ago. It's a simple stone chamber with doors on either end. You take your vessel into, close the doors, and either let the water out or let the water in. The boat rises or falls, and you go on your way. Simple technology, very basic, but it really works. Really works very well. This is the canal lock at Waterloo. We talked about Waterloo before, and part of that lock is still there. And this is an interesting lock because part of it was an aqueduct, actually. There was a stone part and a wooden part. More about that later. Another picture. There's a lock in Morris County that's actually being restored as we speak. It's already into phase 2 of a restoration project, and that lock is Lock 2 East in Wharton. The locks and inclined planes had numbers, and they were numbered outward from the center being Lake Apacong. So there was a western division and an eastern division to the canal. Locks and inclined planes on the east side would be Lock 2 East, 3 East, Plane 2, 3, so on. Another picture. This is a historic picture from Lock 2 East in Wharton. And this is an Owen Vo picture. Owen Vo was a local photographer who took lots of pictures in around the turn of the last century. And we have a lot of those. The Historical Society in Roxbury owns many of his pictures, a whole collection of his pictures, and they've been preserved. And Owen did a really nice thing. He signed all of his negatives. He actually scratched it into the negative and he put dates on there. So this is a picture. This is 1904 in August. This is a hot August morning, and there's a boat, a westbound boat, in the lock. The boat has just arrived, and the lock tender is up here at the other end, and he's adjusting the drop gate. The boat's going to come up in the lock, and it's going to move on as a light boat going west. The mules are standing in the shade. Mule tender is changing the mule's collars. Everybody's doing something. These guys are busy people. They need to make their trips. One of the things that people really like are the two girls. They're obviously along for the ride, but a canal boat is not a very comfortable place to live. There's no refrigeration, for one thing, so whatever you're going to eat that day, you basically have to buy that day. So the girls have been to the store, and there's got a basket here, there's a thermos in the other girl's hand, so they're waiting for the boat to come up. As soon as the boat is up in the lock, they'll step on board, and this boat will be off down the canal, making their trips. There's two other interesting things that you can see in this picture. This is one of those pictures that has so much to look for. There's a conch shell horn right here on the roof of the cabin, and the captain of the boat was required to blow that horn when he was approaching a lock or an inclined plane. The whole idea was to keep the boats moving. So he would sound that horn, and so the lock or plane tender would know a boat was coming, and he'd be ready to get that boat into the lock or up or down the plane. Two other things. There are 3 tomatoes ripening on the lid of the companionway. Another picture. So, about 7 years ago, Wharton Borough and the Canal Society partnered in a project to see if they could restore that lock. And so this is how it looked back then. It was just an open field. This is an artist's conception of what the lock area looked like, with the lower section of the canal, the lock, the upper section of the canal, the lock tender's house. Lock tenders worked very long hours, and they lived, right where they worked, and they got a free house to live in. That was pretty good, and they got to live in it all winter when the canal wasn't open. So the first part of the project was to do some archaeology to prove, well, was that lock still there? Nobody really knew. So archaeologists were hired, and they dug down into the lock, and they found, the lock walls, they were still there. And they even found some neat artifacts. So they covered that in, got some more money, another picture, and started to make some plans to see if that lock can be reconstructed. Now, locks are basically very simple in concept, but they're actually massive stone structures. And you only really see just the top of them when you approach a lock. They actually get bigger as they go down. You don't want those lock walls to move. You don't want the water in the canal to undermine those walls. You don't want those walls leaning in, leaning out. The boat has to fit right in there, and you don't want any messing around. So, and one of the interesting things about a lock is those two massive walls are actually built on a wooden platform. So actually the whole area of the lock is excavated, a huge hole is created, and some 40-foot long 10 by 10 beams, about 60 of them are laid out, and then 2 layers of 2-inch thick planks are put on top of that, and then your stonework goes up, and buttresses coming down the sides, and all the way up until you get to the height of the top of the lock. Now that wooden platform, as long as it's down there underground, staying wet, it's perfectly fine. And one of the things that the archaeologists wanted to know was, well, was that true? Was that really there? Was that wooden platform there? And was this actually a a sound structure. And so, yes, they found out it did work. That wooden base was still there. As a matter of fact, they found a lot of interesting things. Another picture. So about a year and a half ago, they started doing excavations. Plans were made, engineering studies, contractors hired, and they started digging up that lock. Gradually going from the middle out to the ends, finding all kinds of neat stuff in the muck down there in the bottom of the lock. Another picture. So one of the things we didn't expect was that, they didn't really destroy this lock. They just, pushed the dirt in. All the machinery, all the control devices that made the lock work, they didn't, take them away. They just, pushed them in the mud. And so the archaeologists really had a field day. Every working part of the lock was still there. This is the upper end of the gate of the lock, where the drop gate was. There was that gate didn't open like this; it opened like this, and there were valves on a platform under that gate that let the water down into the lock, and they were big paddle valves that shutters that opened like this. Tons of water would go into the lock all at one time and fill it very, very fast. And pretty much all of that was right there. The wooden beams, you can see that they survived. They were still in place. One of the sets of valves was knocked kind of askew, but the other one was right in place. And it was really pretty neat to see all this stuff. Another picture. Even the lock gates were still there. One was broken, but one was absolutely in good shape. They weigh a couple of tons. That's one of the problems. They're really, really heavy and really big. They're about 16 feet tall and, made of very heavy wooden beams. Another picture. So as the project wound along, they cleaned the lock out completely and started rebuilding up the stonework. One of the things that had happened when the canal was abandoned, they wanted to level off the lock. They wanted to bury it, level it off, put it away. And so they did cut the lock down a couple of feet at the downstream side and pushed the stones in. But all those stones were pulled back out again, put aside. The lock was cleaned out. You can see there's the wooden floor, still there, good condition. There's the sill that the miter gates close on, and they started building the walls back up again. Another picture. So this is what it looks like now. This is the end of phase 2. The lock walls are built all the way as high as they need to go, and that's where we were, I guess, last year. So now the next phase is funded. Hasn't quite started yet. There's some squabbling about money, and there's a little bit of shortfall in what they need to do. Some of the things they didn't know about when this project started. Projects always seem to expand and never contract. They always get more complicated, and they never get less complicated. So they're going to raise these walls another 1.5 feet, and that includes the capstones that go on top. And they're going to rebuild the gates. And at the end, we hope that we will have an operating lock. So if not this year, next year, we'll be able to take our canal boat ride on Morton Canal Day into the lock and raise it and lower it. We see it. Anyway, another picture. And then, of course, locks are the old technology. The other kind of technology is the new technology, and that, of course, was the inclined planes. And don't forget, the canal had to do all that climbing, all that up and downhill climbing. And that was a very big deal back in the 1830s. That kind of technology had been tried in England. There were canals in England, in the Shropshire area. There were coal mines that were in rather inconvenient places, and they needed to be able to get at that coal, and they had built some canals and some tugboat inclines. They some very small boats, maybe carrying 5 8 tons of coal in a big metal pot, and they would be able to lower that up and down an incline and put these things on a canal boat and move them back and forth. And that was really pretty successful. They thought that was a very good idea. And of course, smart people in this country knew all about that. And so they figured, well, okay, we've got this canal here, and we had to figure out a way to make it work. We've already got this thing half planned, and they actually had not quite figured out the elevation thing right until they started to work up the engineering. So they really had to solve that problem, and so they thought, well, they can take that concept of inclined planes, and we'll just make it a little bigger. Well, that was a good idea, but it was a long time in making that work. And there were like 2 phases to that. They started off using water wheels and chain to pull the boats up and down, and counterbalanced boats, light boats counterbalancing heavy boats. And that's the way the canal, where the technology was when the canal first opened. And it worked. Yeah, okay, it worked, pretty well. They could actually move boats with 70 tons of cargo up and down those planes, back and forth up and down the canal. And they were pretty happy with that. They actually got that technology to work. But that was still back in the days of wooden technology, and the skills to manufacture metal parts was not really available in this country yet. So it wasn't until, well, maybe 10 or 15 years later they ran the canal, they operated these inclined planes, but only that short time showed them that they really had not judged the problem correctly. They were never ever going to make any money with those boats with their 20-ton cargoes. That was not going to work at all. This was all costing a lot more than anybody imagined it would. And so they had to rethink those inclined planes. And so, unfortunately, by only that 15 years later, they had some better technology available. And so they actually rebuilt all the inclined planes, and then the canal too. They made the canal wider, they made the canal deeper, and what they really needed to do was to have boats with 70-ton cargoes. That was, the bean counters, did their work, and they decided if they could only, get to that kind of a level, things would work. So all the pictures that we have of those wonderful inclined planes that everybody loves is of that level of technology. Nothing from that old level. That was so long ago, people just didn't have any cameras back then. There's some drawings, and some archaeology, but no pictures. So this is the inclined plane at Waterloo. And a little diagram of how it works. This is a huge water-powered machine. You're going to use the water power potential from the upper level of the canal. You got hundreds, thousands of tons of water, in a canal on a higher level, and you're going to use the potential, of that water. You're going to drop that water down, and you're going to use that to power machinery, and the water is going to wind up in the lower level of the canal, and that machinery is going to be able to pull your boats up and down the plane. So you've got a powerhouse, you've got the upper level of canal, you're going to bring the water to the powerhouse, drop it down into a turbine, use that turbine to turn a huge cable drum, and that's going to pull a cradle car with a boat up and down the inclined plane. And it actually worked fairly well. Within, about 10 minutes you could take a boat up or down that plane. A lot faster than a group of locks could have been operated. Another picture. This is the inclined plane at Ledgewood. Many people anyway, know of Jim Lee's plane out in Warren County. Jim Lee's books, of course, and his plane is one that you could always visit, for many years. But right here in Morris County, we have a very nice inclined plane site in Ledgewood. And I think it really does, not any one historical site, certainly canal site, has one of everything. one has a little bit of this, one has a little bit of that, but this one, I think, although it doesn't have a turbine, it has almost everything else to show you. This is a historic picture looking down the plain. Here is that long head race, a trough, bringing water to the powerhouse. Hundreds of tons of water are flowing out in this trough all the way to the powerhouse. It's going to be dumped down a penstock pipe. It's going to fall 45 feet and come up inside that huge sprinkler head of a turbine. And it's going to create the force to pull the boats up and down the hill. Here's the cable that's going to pull the boats up and down, and here's some idler pulleys that are keeping that plane rolling as it moves around the incline. Another picture. This is another historic picture looking head-on into the plane. Another picture. And fortunately, I guess many years ago now, the Rotary Club up in Roxbury took it as a project to not do some archaeology, but to actually just to stabilize this plane, to clear it off. It was basically just a site in the woods that was difficult to identify, and they went in and they cleared the trees off and pretty much returned it to a configuration that you could actually go there and visit and see it and figure out what it was all about. You're looking, up that plane. Here's the sleeper stones that held the rails on which the cradle cars rode up and down on. And they did a really marvelous job. It was really one of the best places to go and see the canal, and still is. Here's a diagram of what that turbine looked like. The water is dropping down that penstock pipe. It's coming up inside this huge sprinkler head, and with 4 arms, that huge force of water is turning that turbine, and that's what's providing the momentum to pull the boats up and down. Unfortunately, they cleaned out this turbine chamber, but they really, that was about where they stopped. And for years, that turbine chamber was kind of an issue because the top of it, sort of came up to the surface, and they sort of had it covered with some roll fencing, and that was about all. It was very fortunate that nobody ever fell in there because it really is pretty damn deep. So in the I guess in about 2003 or 4, some issues were beginning to develop with what had been done earlier. Another picture. What was happening is down there in that turbine chamber that had been cleaned out, it was all beginning to settle. Another situation where this was a huge stone structure, built on one of those wooden platforms again. And that was all fine with the lock because that had been buried for all those years. The water table was up and it kept everything nice and wet down there. Everything was great. But with this inclined plane turbine chamber, its wooden platform was getting wet and dry and pretty much disappeared. And so all that stonework started to settle over the years. And so what was happening, this is the tail race arch. The water goes into the turbine chamber, through the turbine, sprays out, and then it has to go someplace. It wants to go back into the lower level of the canal, so you have to have a long tunnel to take it out from the turbine chamber, put the water back in the canal. So this is that tail race tunnel, and you can see that arch is just about to fail. And it started off, it wasn't too bad, but as the years went on, it began to slip more and slip more and slip more. And the problem was there was absolutely no footing under that at all. It had all been built with that wood technology, and so plans had to be drawn, engineers hired, archaeologists brought in, and they actually, you can see them here, they're doing excavations, they're actually proving, well, no footings. And so, in order to be able to do something about that stonework before it collapsed, now if that was about to come down, and if it did, that whole wall would come down, and that would be an incredible mess. A $1 million mess. And every once in a while, you get you get to do a job the right way, and this was one of those situations where a project got done and got done well before it became a disaster. Another picture. So, contractors were hired and came in and they actually jacked those stones right back into shape. So they got some jacks and some forms, pushed the stones back into place, reformed the arch, regrouted all the stonework, and put that right back into a great condition. Another picture. They took the stonework all throughout the rest of the structure and reappointed that. This is where the tail race comes out to the surface, and here's a historic picture. That was not a place you would want to be standing when the inclined plane was running. A lot of water would become pouring through there. This is a bypass. When the canal, when the inclined plane was not in operation, they still had to be passing water down the canal to keep the lower level filled. So there was a bypass. Water was always flowing down that. When the inclined plane turbine was running, water would be pouring out of here, exiting the turbine. So that's still there today, and you can go into that tail race tunnel and go into the turbine chamber and see how all this worked. That's one of the neat things about this plane. Another picture. So, as part of this project, all the rest of the stonework got a good taking care of. It all got repointed. It all got put back into excellent condition. And that situation where this stonework had just come up to the surface was fixed. They raised the stonework about 2 feet above and made it much more sturdy. Another picture. They put some bluestone caps all the way around. This is the staircase that was constructed so that someone could go down and actually keep the machinery lubricated down there without having to get themselves chopped up by that turbine going around. And they put some grating over the top so that you can actually still see down in there, but without falling down in there. This was really a project that worked out very well. Another picture. And to keep it well, to keep it working, a structure was built over the top with a water control system so that runoff would go off to the side, not go down into the turbine chamber, causing that freeze thaw again. So this is the way that you can see it today. It's good for another 200 years, and it's all been put back together again. Really a job well done. These contractors did a beautiful job for us. Another picture. One of the other places where that you can see all of these canal, all this canal technology and a lot of canal history all come together in one place is at Waterloo. And one of the gentlemen mentioned about Waterloo being closed. Well, it's not really closed. The Canal Society has been keeping it open for the last 7 years since the Waterloo Foundation of the Arts went out of business. And on a limited basis, we can't have it open every day. We are only a historical society after all, but we have been keeping it open every summer, every 2 weeks, and it will be open this year again, starting on June 29th. And so it's a pretty good show. And it's really a cool place. Even if you don't like canals, you don't even have to like canals to like Waterloo. It's a very cool place. Another picture? Waterloo has a wonderful, deep history. It goes way back to the 1700s. I mean, everybody knows it as a park, as a cutesy Victorian mansion, kind of a place, but actually its roots go all the way back to the 1700s, when two fellows from Philadelphia, two wealthy merchants from Philadelphia started buying land in that area of New Jersey. They wanted to put themselves into the iron business, and they built a blast furnace up at Andover, just 7 miles north of Waterloo, but there really wasn't enough water up there to run a blast furnace and a finery forge. When you make with a blast furnace, you make pig iron, but what you really want, that value-added product, is wrought iron. That's what a blacksmith uses. Another one of those, technological things. Doesn't make a lot of sense to many people because we don't, care about that kind of stuff anymore. But wrought iron is what a blacksmith can make you almost anything from. So you want to take that pig iron down to your finery forge and adjust the carbon in it and make some wrought iron. And they needed to do that, but they couldn't do it up by their blast furnace, so they got some additional property down by the river, down by the Musconetcong River at Waterloo. And so Waterloo started out as a village that supported one of these finery forges. Another picture. And all kinds of interesting things were done to make this all work. One of the reasons that they had built that blast furnace up there was there's a really great supply of iron ore at the Andover mines, just north of there. And so although that blast furnace went out of business, it was owned by those two fellows from Philadelphia were Tories. And so during the Revolution, they did not do very well. They had their property taken away from them. But later on, those mines up there were still very valuable. And by the 1840s, other people had bought those mines, and they were actually able to bring the ore down to the Morris Canal at Waterloo. And to do that, they built first a tramway and then a railroad. And as in many other places, people wanted to do business, and they brought mining property, and they would bring the ore down to the canal in these short tramways and railroads that did very good service long before through railroads became a big deal. Another picture. So the layout of Waterloo. It's a small village that basically grew up around the canal. Its days as a finery forge had long disappeared by the time the canal came along, but the Smith family, they were local farmers. They had bought property 2 miles up the river, and they did very well. And they started buying a lot of other farmland up and down the river, and they owned this area that was called Old Andover at that time. And when the canal was built, it was going to come right through their property, and there was going to have to be an inclined plane and a lock there. And so they were in a wonderful position to thrive, and they were very good businessmen, and they did a very good job of building a canal store and a grist mill and a sawmill, and they really thrived. And so the canal and the Smith family had a lot of synergy going here. And so that is the core of what we see today. The village of Waterloo, the historic village of Waterloo, is a canal town that grew up on the roots of that old finery forge village with the help of the commerce from the Morris Canal. The picture. Historic pictures of Waterloo. Here's the base of that inclined plane coming down the hill into the Musconetcong River that's been raised into a pond behind a dam. Boats will then come across it into a lock. This is Smith's store. Still stands today. Still is a canal store. Another picture. This is the way the canal looks today. And still, the lock is still there. Half of it anyway. This is the way it used to look in historic view down below. Another picture. Smith's store is probably the best surviving canal stores. There were a lot of them because basically, there was a lot of trade that went up and down the canal. People came to the canal for reasons of business. The boatmen needed to be able to buy supplies, and so it was very common to find stores along the canal. And this one is a great example. You can see that it backs up right up to the canal. You could bring your boat right up to the back of the building, and there are several loading doors there, and a little hood at the top for a wheel to bring things, up into the upper floors. And there's actually a wheel up in the attic that was used, a winding wheel that was used to run a rope laying down into boats, and you could turn it with an endless chain and bring bales or boxes or barrels up into the store. Another picture. Look out, and he can see the lower end of his plane, down there, and he can look out the back window, and he can see the top end. So his associate, the brakeman, he would be riding that cradle car, and his job was to get the boats on and off that cradle car, make sure everything, went efficiently, break up fistfights, decide who was next, and basically signal to the plane tender, hey, okay, get the machinery going, get this boat moving. And so the plane tender up there in his lofty office there could see what was going on at both ends of the plane. Another picture. So today, this little piece of the canal is what we're going to turn into a park. And it's basically, it's all there. The sleeper stones are all there. At the top of the plane is a bit raised above the level of the ground to keep it on a nice even 1:11 slope, up and over the top of the crest. And so we've been working for about a year to get it all cleaned off. Unfortunately, people dumped their garbage in there for many years, and so we're spending a lot of time taking their garbage away. Another picture. So, well, here's the cleanup crew. So well, I'm the young one, and everybody is at least 4 or 5 years older than me. It's amazing how well these old people work. Move a lot of trash. Another picture. We filled up many dumpsters full of stuff. Another picture. Now here's some of our labors, and we're actually digging down, uncovering the sleeper stones. The sleeper stones up and down both sides of the plane are basically still there. In many cases, these things were not destroyed. No, more damage than need be done was done when the canal was abandoned. They, may have torn the buildings down and pushed the stones in, but they didn't really, go and bulldoze these things as might be done today. Kathy Fisher from Mendham is sweeping off those stones as we're digging, and here's Rudy going at it with the shovel, trying to get those stones back up to the surface. Another picture. So this is basically where it is today. We've taken this whole area and got it pretty much cleaned off, and got lots of trees cut and a lot of brush taken out, and I think the interpretive signs are in now. The paths will go in a couple of weeks, and this park will be dedicated in July the 7th, I believe. So it will be open for business. And hopefully in years to come, we will continue it, the path from the top, from this little park, along the basin that was between the two inclined planes, up to the inclined plane above, and up and around that one, and make really quite a fine park of this. Another picture. And so this is the logo that I've created for this park, and this is the logo that we have for the Greenway, the statewide Greenway. And so these are some of the things that are happening, with the canal, across the county, across the state, actually. These are basically projects that are here, nearby you, things that you can visit right now. In Passaic County and Warren County, there are similar projects going on. And so pretty soon, you'll be able to do Morris Canal Greenway pretty much all the way across the state. Now, I think that's the last picture. You want to give it another click?
That's it.
Okay. Questions? Thoughts? Sir?
Sure. 1991, January, Canal Society had a walk from Ledgewood Circle past Lake Apaca.
Yeah.
And they asked to see our museum. We have a whole room on the market.
Yes, you do. And a very fine one.
And we didn't heat the building at the time. And they said, well, they didn't care there was no heat. We didn't know when they'd show up, so Marty Kane and I went on the walk. And I'm taking pictures in that tail race on 2 East.
Okay.
Stalactites of ice hanging.
Absolutely.
And they were pushing me. Let me take my picture, and then you can look at, oh no, we're going in. So Richard did the duck walk all the way down that thing. We got in the chamber, and I'm taking photographs. And I get around to the archway.
Yeah.
The keystone is about here. One of the side ones is missing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank God it was frozen. We could have been in there forever if something let loose.
Yes. Well, that didn't get better for many years. You basically saw the picture, and how those stones were. I think it was about 2 inches of stone on stone that was holding that arch together.
Yeah, and the tar was still on the hill.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the cables, we actually have in the museum a hunk of that cable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I believe the turbine is at the state park.
That's the turbine from number 3.
Number 3. Okay.
You're talking about being in number 2, plane number 2. Mm-hmm. Plane number 3 was a more shallow plane, just down below that, and that was very easy to get at.
You can also find some sleeper stones in somebody's stone wall down there.
Yes, you can.
On Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But Canal Park is one of those great places. They're just waiting for the economy to get a little better, and they've got plans to do more. Sir, in the back.
Yeah. What was the period of time in which the Morris Canal was actually used and used successfully?
Well, it operated from 1831 to 1924. If you're looking for the period in which it was useful, it was useful pretty much up until after the Civil War. Its best years were in the mid 1860s. After that, its usefulness began to decline. And in 1871, like most all of the rest of the anthracite carrying canals, it was leased to a railroad.
Yeah.
The railroads were beginning railroad technology was getting more robust. The coal trade was becoming not just $1 million business, $1 billion business, and so there was fortunes to be made, and the railroads did not have a united effort to accomplish delivering coal. There were railroads here and railroads there, and big ones and small ones. And the small ones needed access to the port of New York in order to be able to make money. They didn't want to have to go other people's tracks, and so the Lehigh Valley Railroad in 1871 leased the Morris Canal, and did not kill it, but began to strangle it.
Was there a period of time when the canal paid for itself? It was a profitable venture?
It was. Its best years were in the 1860s, and it did pay some dividends in those days. After the canal was leased to the railroad, one of the stipulations in the contract of the lease was that the railroad would pay 7.5% on the stock. So, hey, okay, these days, I'd go for 7.5%, just, take me down there, I'll bring him a bushel basket of money. So, we're not talking big bucks, but often these kinds of projects do not pay off to the investors in the specific project, but they increase the value of the financial enterprises that benefit from the project being there. Ma'am.
Where did the canal actually end? I mean, it was built so that they would get coal over from Pennsylvania to New York. So
Yeah.
where was the end of it?
The canal first ended at Tidewater in Newark.
Oh, okay.
These projects were all much more expensive than they thought they were going to be. Yeah. And so, and they really had no idea how profitable the coal trade was going to be. And so they really didn't know, well, you might say they didn't know what they were doing.
What did they do then?
They originally ended the canal in Newark at the Passaic River, yeah. But they immediately realized that was not close enough to their market. They were going to have to continue on to Jersey City, and within 4 years, they had stole some more stock, gotten some more investors, and they continued the canal all the way across the Hackensack, across the Passaic River into Jersey City, and all the way to this little basin on the Hudson River. And that gave them direct access to their market.
Thank you.
What was the highest and lowest? What was the total elevation that made it unique?
It's 673 feet, if I can remember. I always rounded off to 1,700. I always remember that.
It's tremendous. tremendous.
Don't think, I'm an artist, not a mathematician, so.
It's going up and down. You say
Yeah, a change of elevation. Lake Apacon is 900 some odd feet above sea level.
14 at the top of the spillway.
Hey, there's the guy who knows. Okay.
It's not a
Who was
dam,
cutting
it's a
sleeper
spillway.
Who was cutting those huge, huge wall blocks? Where were they coming from and who was doing the work?
The canal was built by local contractors.
Did they move the rocks?
Very carefully.
Yeah, I guess so.
People don't wait around to, in our modern day, when the shovel has been de-invented, we don't understand how you possibly can do any work without a backhoe. I live at historic Speedwell, and the maintenance guys come through and they clean up the property, and they can't do anything with a shovel. They have to get a backhoe in there, people, for thousands of years knew how to move heavy things. A little guy with some smarts can move a big thing if he knows how to do it. Levers are very good. Sir?
In Jersey City, is any part of the canal still there?
There are remains that I know and appreciate. Many of you may not be able to identify those as remains of a canal. However, there is a canal greenway project in Jersey City, in Hudson County, active right now, and they're going to have their damn bikeway all the way along the route of the canal. The canal makes a big loop. It goes across the river into Jersey City, goes south almost to Bayonne. Don't forget that the ridge line of the Palisades comes, separates New Jersey from the Hudson River, and that ledge of rock begins to dip at Jersey City, into the ground. So the canal has to go down around the edge of it, and then come up the other side till it's, pretty much it's up past Communipaw Avenue, where the old part of Jersey City used to be. Now, not up on the hill where Journal Square is now. Jersey City was born down on the river. And so that's where the canal ended. And there was first a small basin, and then a larger basin, and a huge part of the shoreline was filled in to make solid ground from there on south. Other thoughts or questions? Robbie?
I think that basin's still there. It's
Sure it is.
right next to Jersey Central Railroad.
Both basins are still there.
Still, that's a big commercial enterprise today. Basin.
For years, there was a shady boatyard there that people just sort of squatted around, and now that's all been cleaned away. It's now surrounded by $1 million condos. Yeah. It's all very cush and cutesy. And the big basin next to it is still there. And of course, on the other side of that is Liberty State Park, the most popular and successful state park in the state. Jersey City is busy reinventing itself, all along the river. High-rise buildings that are, rivaling the New York skyline are going up all along through that area. So. That part of Jersey City is very alive and well, and especially around the Little Basin. Sarah in the back.
It's my understanding that many of these immigrants coming from other countries literally spent their life digging these canals. I was privileged to ride on the Delaware and Raritan Canal.
Yeah.
And there's a little island down there. I was told, I assume it's true, there are stones there where Irishmen died.
Oh.
Literally died. They had nowhere else to go, and they died, and they buried them on that island. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it could be likely.
Well, nobody cared about those guys back in those days. And I don't know if you could ever prove any of those stories, but certainly some of them must be true. Yeah. But the earliest canal, we started talking about who built the canal, and it's often said that the Irishmen built the Morris Canal, but probably not that many. It wasn't the potato famines didn't come along until the 1840s. So, and the canal was built 1820s into the 1830s. So it was basically local people, and sections of the canal were let out on contract. You could bid on a contract. And, you know, you go down to the train station and get some local guys, you know, that are out of work, and you start digging. And I guess you had to put up a bond, but it was built by local people, you know, who took, you know, one section or several sections and committed to build them for a set cost. Inclined planes and locks were built by people with a little more savvy. You know, locks, that was any really good mason who could move and work with heavy stones could build a lock with a little experience. But the guys who built the inclined planes, that technology took a lot of fussing around. They built the first one in Rockaway, and it kind of worked. I think they must have exerted, you know, quite a bit of influence upon the newspapers to not say anything too bad about it, because it didn't, you know, it was not a great success. So they kept building other inclined planes, prototypes, until they finally got a prototype that would work, you know, would pretty much work. And so they actually, and that started a long series of tinkering with those inclined planes, until finally, in the late 1840s into the 1850s, a fellow named Talcott came along, and he was a very good engineer. And he took the whole concept and realized that he could have that wire rope instead of chains to pull the boats up and down. And he looked at water wheels, and he looked at turbines, and he realized that that a reaction turbine could really produce a tremendous amount of torque. And so he replaced all the water wheels with those turbines, and he made those inclined planes really work. Sir.
Is it fair to say that the railroads sort of ultimately resulted in the stopping of canals to be built? I think you were kind of alluding, and there was a time when they were working in parallel, but the canals started to be dug in 1824, and maybe railroads weren't quite there. Was that something that, was that technology that kind of stopped the idea of digging canals?
The whole, you know, canals, railroads thing is a chicken and egg story. You don't get the railroads. You can't get to railroads unless you go through the canals first. And so they worked in tandem for a long time, and eventually railroad technology was better technology and did, you know, prevail, but only after a long struggle. The struggle's not a good word. When they built canals in the 1830s, railroad technology was still was around. It was around already. When they started building the D&R Canal across southern New Jersey, it was a combined company with the Camden and Amboy Railroad. And those two companies were joined at the hip for forever. However, the industrial strength to make railroads really work was not available. It was not there. Even if you had a locomotive that would really work, was really strong enough to pull, you know, a real load up a decent grade, you didn't have the ability to make the track for it to run on. That's right. It took a long time to develop, you know, how to make a T-rail, and then have enough steel mills. I mean, as a matter of fact, steel mills. Steel was not even available. Wrought iron rails. A long time you had only wrought iron rails. You didn't have the factories to make enough rails to make railroads that would go any place.
So there's a period of time when there was some synergy between the two,
yes.
And ultimately the railroads or the railroad building and the engines became powerful.
Canals made it possible to create the industrial strength, make that coal available, so that people could start thinking about, whoa, hey, you know, we really could invest in, it was, you know, coal and iron in transportation, you know, created a three-pointed triangle that went around and around in a synergistic, you know, pattern and built on each other.
I was just in Allaire State Park a week ago, and they had the sleeper stones through the original track there that was actually wooden with a metal top.
Yes.
And the T-rails were brought over from, I think, Scotland. A lot of them were done in Allaire State Park, or in the foundries there.
Well, the Howells were the family that ran Alair. They were very, very savvy iron masters.
Yeah.
They could make big castings when nobody else could make big castings. And so they were a very, savvy bunch of people. Yes, the original railroad rails were basically wooden sleepers with strap iron, and that would not support much of a locomotive. Wouldn't work at all. But the original, but that's the way they did it, and then that's what started it off. It takes a lot of industrial oomph and a lot of technological knowledge to be able to make, and also anthracite coal in much larger blast furnaces to be able to make enough rails and to learn how to make those rails that you could actually make a railroad, have a railroad that's long enough to go anyplace. So it's all a progression. One thing leads to another. It's a very long, complicated, and fascinating story. Now, I always, yell at people when they want to cut the story off and, tell me how sexy railroads are. Yeah, okay, cool. But, look at the whole story. Come on, give yourself a break.
Joe?
Yes.
2 parts. Canal ran from weekdays, didn't run on Sunday.
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
From ice to ice.
Correct.
Trains could run
Yes, they could.
constantly. And
Absolutely.
It took, 5 days from
Yes.
the river to Jersey City.
Can't beat it.
Part 2.
Yeah.
The 2013 fall drawdown, the big one at Lake
Yeah.
Appomattox. The canal prism at the spillway will be visible.
Oh, cool.
At least it was 5 years ago.
Okay, well, it's still there.
Some of the
Yeah.
posts from the
Yeah.
guard lock are still visible.
Yeah.
With the water grooves in them.
Yeah.
And then past the spillway, under the bridge and to the left is a portion of the Morris Canal that's on state property. They don't advertise it,
Yeah.
but it's a nice walk in there.
Yeah. There's a tremendous amount of, canal stuff and all kinds of other stuff. I do walks for county parks. There's a list on the table. Please take them. And also some newsletters for the Canal Society. And we look at all kinds of stuff. The world is full of all kinds of neat stuff. Canal stuff, iron stuff, mining stuff. Just about fascinating things happen, right under our feet here in New Jersey. And all you got to do is go out and look for them. Train your eye to see. And it's amazing the cool stuff you can find. There's nothing wrong with canals still. It still is the cheapest way to move a big pile of stuff. It's got its limitations. It freezes in the winter. Sure, absolutely. But if you've got a great big pile of stuff and you want to move it from one place to another, if you can put it on a boat, that's the way to do it. And there's still many canals in Europe that work very successfully. We have hundreds of miles of canalized rivers in this country that still operate, taking huge tows of boats, one way or another, delivering millions of tons of stuff. It's just that, with a canal, you can't go door to door. And actually, with a railroad, you can't go door to door. But with an interstate highway, wow, you can go door to door. So it's all about options. Each layer of technology. And when the federal government is building interstate highways, how can anybody compete? Even railroads. So it's all synergistic. Sir?
Joe, is there any thought to use the right-of-way of the canal for a highway?
People thought about that. In the 1920s, there were some concepts pushed forward to make it into a scenic parkway. Of course, the Depression came along, and all those ideas were canceled. In Bloomfield, Kennedy Boulevard is over the top of a lot of the a lot of the right-of-way of the canal, including the inclined plane in Bloomfield. Most of the right-of-way of the canal is not contiguous enough to be useful in that way. Ma'am in the back?
Yeah, my grandmother used to ice skate on the Bloomfield, the canal in Bloomfield.
Yep. Lots of people, in the later days of the canal, from the teens into the 20s, nobody much cared what you did with the canal. People swam in the canal, people skated on the canal, people walked along the canal. Ma'am, you had a question over here.
Yeah, a basic question. So if you're taking the coal from Pennsylvania and you're going on the canal all the way to Jersey City,
Yep.
then are you coming back with an empty boat, or are you coming back with stuff? And the canals on the pictures, because it was hard to see,
Yeah.
looked kind of narrow, so do they have
Yeah.
kind of traffic?
Yeah.
Okay, so
But that's a good question.
well, thank you.
Yeah. On many canals, they did not have a return cargo. But with the Morris Canal, remember we talked about iron making and iron mining? Well, there's millions of tons of iron ore in the New Jersey Highlands, and it was one of the reasons that the canal was built in the first place. Coming up and over the Highlands of New Jersey was not exactly a bright idea. There was another canal in New Jersey, the DNR Canal, that crosses the skinny waist of the Peanut, and that was actually a much better idea. And but up here in the Highlands, and including in Mendham, since before the Revolutionary War, back in the 1730s, people were up here in these hills in New Jersey trying to make money in the iron business. That was when not a lot of good farmland in the Highlands, but there's plenty of iron ore. And but here you've got people trying to compete in a world market without a transportation system. So they had a potential to be making a lot of money, but they, were never ever quite succeeding because they didn't have a way to move their product around. But the canal, solved that problem for them. So by the 1840s, they had discovered how to make iron with anthracite coal. Before that, they were using charcoal. For thousands of years, since people stopped using stone axes, they've been making iron with charcoal. Well, that burns up a lot of trees, and you can only make an iron furnace just so big when you're using charcoal as your fuel. As soon as you learn how to make iron with anthracite coal, it's a much, much sturdier blast furnace fuel. Instead of making your blast furnace this big, you can make your blast furnace this big. Huge difference in your capacity. So what actually happened was that the iron industry shifted from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. It moved closer to the fuel. And so those big iron furnaces might have been in Pennsylvania, but they still needed ore. And so they needed ore from New Jersey. So the coal went east and the iron ore went west. So one of the good things about the Morris Canal is it had two cargoes, one going each way. And that was a good thing because other things for the Morris Canal didn't work out very well. That one did.
So what did they have to do then? One had to wait somewhere till the other one went through?
The canal was wide enough for the two boats to pass.
Oh, to pass.
The descending heavy boats had the right of way.
Yeah.
That was the boat that was lowest in the water. Yeah. The light boat was supposed to stop, let its tow line go to the bottom so that the heavy boat could pass over the top. That was the way it was supposed to work. I'm sure there were many, brawls and fistfights about who actually had the right of way. But the canal was wide enough for boats to pass. Other thoughts or questions?
I'll just add this. The Delaware and Raritan Canal, J.P. Morgan had his yacht on it.
Yes.
And it had gold inlaid toiletry, issues, sinks and everything.
Uh-huh.
I suspect when he wanted to go on the canal, everybody moved.
Okay, well, I'm going to pick up from that thought. And everybody loves the Morris Canal. The Morris Canal is really cool. You know that. Yeah. Okay, at its peak, and you talked about when the canal was making money. In the 1860s, the Morris Canal's the largest tonnage of coal delivered in the 1864, I think it was like 680,000 tons of coal delivered. The DNR canals, peak year, I think was in 1874, almost 3 million tons. So, which is the better canal? We love the Morris Canal, but what canal really did the work? Think about that. The BNR is another story. Another lecture. It isn't quite so local, but the stories don't lie. The stories are really, really interesting. So you follow the stories, and you always find out something interesting. Okay, anything else? Thank you.